Becoming an insane aimer in CS2 all relies on your crosshair, so I'm going to show you guys the best crosshair that you guys should be using, and I'm going to go through all the settings on how they can help you and what they're used for, so maybe you guys can find some benefits from these crosshair settings. So make sure you guys watch all the tips in this video, and let's go ahead and get started. So starting off for the video, let's talk about what pros are using for their crosshairs. Now you can actually see a lot of the pros are using 0.5 thickness, which is the smallest thickness like you can see on my screen right here, and the length of the crosshair is usually 1.5 to 2.0. So all these pros are using similar crosshairs, and even with a similar gap. There's a few players like Xantaurus that likes a bigger gap, and then there's also some players that like a little bit thicker crosshair like Acor or maybe Hobbit. He has a very small crosshair, but it's very rare to see these dot crosshairs like SDY has a funky crosshair. Apex has a dot in the middle of his crosshair. So you can see that it all really is preference. Now most of the pros do use a crosshair similar to this. Now this is ZywOo's crosshair that I'm using on my screen right here that you can see, going through the different maps, but we need to really break down these settings because crosshair is preference. So we're going to go through and talk about how these settings can benefit you and actually improve your aim. But before we get into that, I need you guys to check out the sponsor of this video, SkinsMonkey.
SkinsMonkey is a CS2 skins trading site and marketplace that provides an instant way to get new skins. My favorite thing about SkinsMonkey is that I can trade skins that I no longer want and trade it for a skin that is equal value. If you use code LouisCS2, you get a $5 bonus on your first trade. If you want to buy skins, you can get a 30% deposit bonus plus an extra 5% using my code. The link is down in the description.
So now that you guys got your cool skins from SkinsMonkey using my link down in the description, let's talk about crosshair thickness. Now we can see a lot of the pros like to use the thinner crosshairs just like ZywOo does here, but how can thickness actually help you? So one of the most important things about a crosshair is you need to be able to see it, and you need to be able to constantly look at it and not lose sight of it. So maybe some players like a little bit thicker crosshair. I rarely ever see anyone above a 1 thickness crosshair. So if you do need to use a 1.5, maybe even a thickness 5 crosshair, that's totally fine. It's all preference, but you need to be able to see it. So the thicker the crosshair, obviously see it a lot better, but you want to make sure that also you can have good precise aim with the crosshair, because if you do have a big crosshair, something like this, your aim might not be as precise as a smaller crosshair. So you just have to keep that in mind, but you do want to make sure that you can always see your crosshair. So maybe something like this might be good for you, but as long as you can stay focused on the crosshair, that is the most important tip. So now that we're talking about keeping our eyes on the crosshair, there is something very important, and that's you need to have a good color on your crosshair. Now this is all preference. As you can see, even on this crosshair wall, like SDY has dark blue, Woxic has more of a red-pink crosshair, this guy on Fnatic, Maddie's, he has a white crosshair. It is all preference, and you need to make sure that you can constantly be able to find your crosshair on your screen, because there's even sometimes when I'm, trying to aim at someone and I'm looking to the left of my crosshair, which isn't good, and that's why I kind of prefer the longer crosshairs, where it's about like 2.0 or 2.5 in length. So this is just something to remember when you are choosing a color. Make sure you find one that you can actually see and keep track of. I know I've also used like a black crosshair before as well, because I find it easier to just locate it with my eyes. So when you are choosing a crosshair color, make sure you keep that in mind. Okay, so now let's talk about the length of the crosshair. I know I did talk about thickness, but the length is a very important subject, because this will make your crosshair smaller, and the smaller your crosshair is, the more precise aim, because since it's so small, you're going to be very snappy towards the head. Now, if you are a new player in Counter-Strike, I do not recommend you guys using a very small crosshair, because obviously, you have more precise aim, and the longer crosshair that you have will make it less precise, but I do find it easier to aim with a longer crosshair. And now this is all preference, because you have teams like VP, who you have like Murd, Jame, and Norbit using a lot smaller crosshair. So if you are a more experienced player, I would recommend a crosshair, something like this, with a 2 length and a 0.5 thickness. I think this is kind of the middle ground for precise aim and being able to find targets a lot easier. Precise aim is very important when you are an experienced player, but if you are a newer player, I mean, you could be rocking a crosshair with like, a 3.5 length if you wanted to, because you can really snap to the body and kill them in the lower ranks, because there's not people instantly headshotting you like in pro play. Even Faceit level 10 pugs, dude, the people that I play with, holy smokes, they use crosshairs like this and they are terrible. But that's not what we're talking about today. When you are choosing your length, just think about the experience you have as a player, but also keep in mind the preference. If you do prefer a smaller crosshair, cool, just grind it out, get used to something like that, and then you'll notice your aim change a lot with the size of your crosshair. So moving on now, we are talking about a gap. Now there's not a lot of pro players that have a gap in their crosshair. They're usually literally just sitting at a -3 gap, which pretty much is no gap at all. There is times where I will find myself using like a -2 gap maybe, if I want to, and usually I have a smaller thickness. So a crosshair like this could be good for you because the size of the gap could help you put the crosshair obviously on a player's head. Now, there's not many players that will, you'll see a gap with like this besides maybe someone like Xantaris. One of my old teammates, J-Dubs, used to use a crosshair like this as well because he copied it from Xantaris. This is something that you guys need to try with. If you can snap to the head a lot easier with a bigger gap, you might find, headshotting more successful because all you have to do is put their head in the middle of this gap, while other players with a smaller gap like a -3 are more putting their crosshair on the head instead of the gap. So it's really mental games to find out what really works for you, and you don't really know what works for you until you try it. So I really recommend you guys go in aimbots and just try out some of these crosshair gaps, because you might find that, maybe you like to rock a, let's say a 0 gap on a crosshair because it's just easy for you to find the head, and that is totally okay. Even though there's not a lot of pros using a gap like this, like you have obviously Maddie's and then you have Xantaris. Don't worry about what other people use. It's just whatever works for you. Now, there is one thing that a lot of people don't use on crosshairs, and that is outlines. I actually really enjoy using an outline on my crosshair. Now, a crosshair like this is something that I do like to use, and that's because it's easier for me to find the crosshair with an outline. Now, some people say that this might mess them up a little bit, but I actually think this really helps me, because if you are someone that has trouble finding their crosshair or keeping their eyes on the crosshair, this outline will actually help it stand out a lot more. As you can see, if I go through different maps here, you're going to see it stands out. Even if I change it to something like a light blue on Nuke, my crosshair still stands out because it's almost like a little back shadow. Now, there is different settings to crosshairs. You can use something like this, which I don't mind at all, but I feel like outlines do get a lot of hate in the crosshair scene, which some people aren't ready to talk about. Now, I've heard Obama talk about a little bit, but we won't go through that subject and get political. But outlines are very, very good on pretty much any map. So if you guys ever like a crosshair and you can't see it on a certain map, I suggest just try adding an outline. A 0.5 and a 1 outline works very good. Now, I obviously wouldn't use something like this. That is just straight up troll, but that obviously helps. Now, if I do take off the outline, we can talk about the Crosshair Dot. Now, this will help you with a more precise aim. And sometimes what I like to do is I like to use a crosshair that looks like this. This is almost like Simple's old crosshair that a lot of the pro players used to use. And I really enjoy this crosshair because it's like the same one, but it just has an outline, and I can actually keep track of it a lot easier. Because if I did turn off this outline and then I did go for the smaller gap like everyone used, this crosshair is very hard to keep track of. So if you guys do like a crosshair, you can always experiment with it and change it up a little bit, because, for this crosshair, I can even change the thickness on it, as you can see here, and go with a little bit bigger length, and it's pretty much the same crosshair. It's just a little bit thicker. So there is always a crosshair out there for you guys, but I really hope you guys go and experiment with some of these crosshairs, because there is some good ones out here. You can even copy a pro if you want, but I would suggest to you guys that you go mess around, because there is, you can turn dynamic crosshairs on, which I'm not a big fan of. I think this is kind of troll. But then also you can have follow recoil on, which I'm not really a fan of. There is a lot of different options for new players, but I thought I would just kind of go through the basic options and explain to you what they're used for and how they can help you. But if you don't really feel like going to create your own crosshair, obviously you can just copy a pro. I know there's a website called Pro Settings that has all the CS pros and their settings on there as well. So if you want to copy sensitivity, you can do that too. I think that's it for the video. I kind of just went through some of the options for you guys, so hopefully you found that useful. And if I left anything out, make sure you guys comment down below what I did leave out, and make sure you guys subscribe to the channel for more content and like the video, and I will see you guys later. Peace out.